This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Late Late Show. My name is Kathryn Taylor. My special guest today is Mark Pritchard. Mark is an executive head teacher and leadership coach, and also an experienced school improvement specialist. And we'll be speaking to him very soon.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Late Late Show, everyone. I'm Kathryn Taylor, speaking to you live from Buckinghamshire in the UK. On today's show, I'll be talking to Mark Pritchard. Mark is an executive head teacher and leadership coach, and he is also an experienced school improvement specialist with expertise in whole school strategic planning, curriculum design and delivery, and leadership development at all levels. He's also an MPQ facilitator and fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching. I'll be talking to Mark about a number of things, including his experience in leading in complexity. Remember, if you're listening in live and you'd like to join us, either to post a question in the chat for Mark to answer, or if you want to call in and speak to us, then please download the Podbean app. Visit ttradio.org and click on Listen Live. And on the homepage, this should take you directly to the show. There you'll be able to post comments and ask questions during our conversation. Once I've spoken to Mark, I'll open up to any of you who want to call in. You can call in by pressing the icon at the top of the phone's app. Click and you'll be able to click this and I'll be able to connect you. I'll be talking to Mark right after the Teacher Talk Radio news.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
BBC News reports that the school run by Ruth Perry, who took her own life after a critical Ofsted, has been rated good after a new inspection. Ms Perry died in January after receiving news her school was being downgraded from outstanding to inadequate. Ms Perry's death prompted an outpouring of anger about the inspection system, although Ofsted defended its grading process and said one-word gradings would not be scrapped. The latest report comments on the work done by the school to address previous weaknesses. The new report raises again the question of high-stakes inspections. MPs are to hold an inquiry in the autumn and will look at how the system is working. Ms Perry's sister, Professor Julia Waters, said in a statement, "The reversal of the previous judgment in a matter of months illustrates why schools should be given the time to correct weaknesses before the final report is published, and that the latest judgment proves what all of those who knew Ruth and the school have known all along." Last month, Ofsted announced some changes which allow schools that were given an inadequate rating over safeguarding to be re-inspected within 3 months, giving them a chance to be regraded if they have addressed concerns. Teachers' pay has been in the news again following 2 further days of strike action from teachers in England. The Daily Mirror reports that Education Secretary Gillian Keegan is continuing to be under pressure to publish pay proposals or risk strikes dragging on even longer. All the major teaching unions in England are conducting fresh ballots after rejecting a £1,000 one-off payment for 2023 and an average 4.5% pay rise for next year. The government referred the decision on pay to the pay review body, who has reportedly recommended a 6.5% pay rise, but the DfE continues to refuse to publish the advice. The Guardian reports on Labour's plans for education should they win the next general election. The article itself focused on plans for early years, which could see more graduate teachers working in nurseries and more nursery places in primary school settings. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said she wanted to put early years on an equal footing with schools to give children the best start in life. The TES gave further comment on Labour's plans as the party set out how it plans to boost teacher retention and improve standards. The plan includes giving early career teachers a one-off payment of £2,400 for staying in the profession and sending regional improvement teams to help schools. New teachers will be required to have QTS, and they will also improve recruitment by cutting costs. The party, currently in opposition, has not made any comment on teacher pay. Finally, the BBC reports on what it describes as a crisis in waiting for children in care. In March, the government extended a ban on unregulated homes to children in care aged 16 and 17. This followed a BBC investigation which found some had been forced to live in caravans and badges, and some had experienced abuse. The crackdown begins in October, when Ofsted will begin inspections, and all unregulated care settings will become illegal. However, some local authorities fear they will have to continue the use of unregulated accommodation, usually in houses and flats in residential areas, because they will have no alternative. Regulated placements are suffering chronic staff shortages, and a squeeze on places at the same time as a rise on numbers of children coming into care is causing continued issues. A DfE spokesperson said it was the responsibility of local authorities to provide safe placements, but that it was investing £142 million over the next 3 years to ensure the transition to Ofsted registration is successful. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I report a question everyone will see at the start of next year. It goes something like this. Hi EduTwitter, can you reply with where you are so I can show my class how far a post on the internet can reach? With a bit of free tech, you can make this much more visual. I'm going to use Google Maps because it's free and most likely you'll have used Google Maps at some point in the past. So, when you have all your responses, sign into Google, go to Maps and click on the menu next to the search box. That's the 3 lines that look like a burger. From the menu, select My Places. You'll now have 4 options: Lists, Labelled, Visited and Maps. Click on Maps and at the bottom select Create Map. Now you can give the map a title so you can find it next year for comparison and add all the places from your Twitter replies. Simply type the name of the place. When it appears with a blue point marker, you can click the plus sign to add it to the map and then select a colour to help it stand out. When you've finished, all places will be saved and you can access the map by following the first few steps: Menu, My Places, Maps. There are loads of other great tools to use also. Measure the distance from your school to those places, hit preview and go into the view only mode. Here you can select a place and you're treated to a short bio and an image of the area. So next time you're looking to bring a lesson to life, why not try using maps to help pupils see where places are in the world? Do you have any top tips for mapping? Why not get in touch and tell us what you want to know about tech? I'm Steve Woods and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, and I'm just joined in the studio now, I hope, by Mark. I'm just going to unmute you, Mark.
Hi.
Good evening.
Hi, Kathryn. How are you?
I'm so good, thank you. Thank you for dialing in. I know it's a bit of an interesting experience when you're doing it for the first time, so thank you so much for bearing with me and persevering with it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, can I say I'm completely out of my comfort zone talking on radio, but also this is genuinely my bedtime. So I'm staying up late specifically for you. I'm a really
Oh,
early.
thank you.
I'm an early riser. I get up at 5 a.m. every morning. So
Oh,
normally
wow.
I'm tucked up in bed at 9 p.m. So
Well, we
I'll try and stay awake.
thank you. I have to pressure to say something interesting now. No, thank you so much, and no, we really do appreciate you taking the time to speak to us tonight. Mark, as I've already said, you're an executive head. You're a sort of leadership coach. You've specialised in school improvement, and a lot of strings to your bow, which is absolutely fantastic. I wonder if you could
Thank
start
you.
for listeners by just telling us what's a typical day like, or even a typical week in your life at your current role.
Wow. Well, I suppose like any school leader, I'm a substantive head teacher, of course. So I lead a school, and I also work in an executive role. So I work across a small multi-academy trust. So I work across other schools too, different phases: primary, middle, and secondary. So I mean, I don't know that there's a typical week. If I'm really honest with you, I sort of had a reasonably typical day today. I met with my deputy head, who we were doing some planning for next year, as well as sorting out some just operational stuff for the school. I did that this morning. I also met. I had a local authority heads meeting, so sort of I don't know how many it was, 15 or so heads. We visited another school, and we were all together. We had a number of things on our agenda, but one of the things, we had a briefing from the police talking about serious and violent crime in the area and how schools can support
Wow.
that. I met with my chair of governors. I met with my CEO today. That was like sort of a typical day, but actually across my week, I do a huge amount of leadership development work. So as you were saying, my role involves quite a lot of sort of leadership, either coaching, mentoring, or delivering programs. So
Okay.
a week ago, I visited another trust to share my thinking around how we develop leaders in a sort of complex world. Just yesterday, I spent a day I had a really great day with a group of middle leaders across a neighboring local authority. And I was delivering the third and final day of a leadership program that I've designed and delivered for them, to help them get ready to effectively lead subject networks next year across the local authority. So they're going to be system leaders leading their subjects. And so I did an adaptive leadership program for them to get them ready for it. And so that yesterday was the third and final day of that. And then also I had a heads collaborative meeting for head teachers across my trust, where we were talking about all sorts of things, from strategies for supporting teachers and developing teachers, as well as strategic planning for next year. So like a range of things happen in my life in any
Yeah.
given day. Yeah.
No, it sounds really exciting, and I was going to bring this up later, but I know that you're also engaged in academic research as well. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your research interests.
Yeah, certainly. So it won't be a surprise, but so I'm doing a doctorate in education, but it won't be a surprise that my sort of chosen field for research, reading, and all round analysis is leadership development. It's literally around thinking about how we develop leaders in schools, so that we have. And I have a really expansive view about what leadership means. I'm not talking about just people who are going to be, I don't know, on the senior leadership team or head teachers. But I think that almost everybody in their role can lead and should be leading. And my very simple, I suppose, possibly naive view of leadership, but I think it works, is simply that if you can imagine a better future for whatever it is that whatever you're doing, whether you're the school receptionist, or whether you're the head of maths, or whether you're, the head teacher of the organization, if you can imagine a better future, and if you can then inspire and encourage other people towards that future, I think you're leading. I think that's what you're doing. You're in the process of leading at that point. And so
Yeah.
I want everybody to see themselves as leaders. And my research has all been around, how do we develop people so that they can continue to learn and develop themselves in a leadership role, with that concept of leadership, with the complexity and with the context of complexity in which I think 21st century schools clearly, we're living in. Ask any head teacher, and I've described a day or a week, but there's a million things I've left out, and a million sort of interactions with people, difficult problems to solve, decisions to be made, and all of that complexity is what I think not only adds challenge but also joy to the role.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, and yeah, because we've spoken before off air. I'm also doing a doctorate in education, and for me, I very much felt that when I first started to get into the reading, and that first year when you're just finding out about the different paradigms of professionalism and all of that kind of stuff, what would you say was the biggest sort of aha moment or revelation that you kind of have experienced on your research journey?
Yeah, really good. Actually, that's a really good question. I read your blog recently, and listeners, if you're listening, go and read Kathryn's blog. I read it, and it was really clear what some of your aha moments were, and that sort of some of that real challenge to your thinking that then changed you. And I think that's the best thing about learning. It's transformative. It changes you, and we want that for our students every day. But I think as professionals, we need to also be engaging and learning and having that transformational experience. And I definitely had that through doing doctoral level study. I think the biggest aha moment, or the biggest sort of transformation, is around, and I sort of always knew it. This is the thing I think about research and about learning, is that there was something in the experience and in the practice that I knew, but then when you read it in the literature, and you read it in in what people have studied and researched and empirically found, the thing for me was all around leadership sense making, and it's a theoretical sort of framework, it's a theoretical model, but it's slightly different from reflection, but it's I suppose a form of reflection. But I think supporting leaders to make sense of their experiences, their context, the complexity they're living, is the thing that I think is the most transformative in terms of their development. The thing that I've tried to do in my own practice, it's something that I've facilitated for others, and it's also something that I'm trying to get better at, and something that I'm learning about. So I think that's been the biggest thing, and I can't recommend it enough. I think there's so much that goes on in schools that we need to take sometimes a step back and make sense of what we're doing. And the irony is not that lost on me. The research has actually been that for me. So by stepping out of my school and out of my sort of leadership role or whatever, and then trundling off to a university, or going off to read some journals, or talking to people like you about your research and other things, what I'm really doing there is stepping back and being. There's a great metaphor in a book called Adaptive Leadership, which I really like, and it's about by the author Heifetz, and he talks about being on the dance floor. And we're all sort of, in our work and in our lives, sort of on the dance floor, and we're engaged in this dance. And what we really need to do occasionally is step off the dance floor and sort of go up onto the balcony, just the dance from above. And I think sense making is that. It's about stepping back, and from that sort of elevated sense, the elevated sense making that you can do from the balcony, you can see how, sort of how the dance is working, and you can spot the patterns, and you can see how people are interacting, and if you're looking carefully, who fancies who, or possibly not in schools, but you know what I mean, all that stuff, and being able to make sense of what's going on before you step back into it. So not only have I sort of experienced that through my own learning, but that's partly what I'm researching and helping to develop, put into practice in my work.
No, that's so interesting. Thank you, and I love that metaphor. It's just really vivid, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'd just like to chat to you a bit more deeply, if we can, about journey into leadership, and what accelerated you from your sort of starting point to your sort of point where you've kind of gone into the SLT team and gone sort of into headship, what would you say were the critical moments in your career?
That's a really good question. I think so. First of all, I didn't know that I wanted to be a teacher. I know some people always, some people are very clear. I've actually got a niece who's 6, and she absolutely wants to be a teacher. She's clear as day about it. She all she does is talk about it. Whenever she wants to play, she plays teachers. When I take her school stuff. I probably shouldn't, but like pens and blank exercise books and things, and it's like the best gift you can give her. She knows she wants to be a teacher. That wasn't me. I didn't know what I was going to do. I went and did a French degree. I loved languages. I loved French in particular. I went to university. I was really lucky to go to university in Paris, and effectively at 18 was, sort of quaffing wine in cafes and reading Flair and thinking, oh my God, I've made it. This is all I wanted to do. Now what do I do? I had no idea what I was going to do with this degree and what, this newfound love of language, literature, and all things French. And when I came back to the UK, it was my connection with my family connection that really got me into teaching. I'm from the northeast of England. You might be able to tell from the slight accent. I went back home to Newcastle, and my mum, who she worked in a school. She was a sort of pastoral manager, and I asked her, "Oh, do you mind asking your head teacher if I can come and just do some sort of work experience and job shadowing in the school to see if I like teaching?" So I spent a week in the Modern Foreign Languages department. Really enjoyed it. I was helping out, sort of just be almost like a classroom assistant, I suppose. And I was 21. And at the end of the week, I went to see the head teacher and said, "Thanks for having me. It's been a really great experience. I think I might do a PGCE." And she said, "Would you like a job?"
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And I said, "Oh, maybe." She said, "Come back on Monday. It's an inset day, and you'll be a member of staff." And it was the reason I got a job in that school. Obviously, especially in those days, it was one of the most difficult schools in England at the time. They obviously struggled to get graduates and teachers, and I learned really the hard way. I've made all the mistakes that year any new teacher can do. I was basically doing Teach First without any of the Teach First support. I just went in without the qualification and was let loose on a classroom. And I sort of I remember sitting just trying to make sense of it for myself. Like, how would I teach this to a group of sort of 13-year-olds? How would I teach the perfect tense in French? And so I was just trying to work it out for myself, as though like that was a perfectly normal thing to do when there are quite established ways of teaching. But anyway, that was sort of my first sort of entry into teaching. And then from there, I suppose leadership wise, I sort of always just sort of outgrew the jobs I was doing. So I did eventually get qualified. I worked abroad for a year in Japan. I had some unfinished business with abroad, and I still possibly do. And then I was thinking actually, like, so I've worked in so many different schools. I've worked in, since that point, I've worked in that disadvantaged comprehensive in the northeast, like I said. And it was in special measures at the time, although I don't suppose I knew that language at that point at 21. But I've also worked in a Catholic high school. I've worked in a selective secondary. I've worked in an inner city London comprehensive. I've worked in a suburban middle school, a primary school in category of concern. I've worked all different places. And actually now, as a leader, I've led in both primary, middle, and secondary, and done that so as a head teacher. I've been sort of the named head teacher in all 3 of those phases, quite by accident. None of them were planned, but I didn't intend to ever be a head teacher either. I sort of just outgrew the job I was doing each time, and I said yes to opportunities. I think rather than saying, and I do mean this. I see this with staff now, and often, people say, "Oh, well, what am I going to get for this? For this to do this job, to do this role?" And I always just said, "Well, oh, okay, I'll do it." I still remember I was on the senior team of. I was on the senior team of the school I currently work at. I'm currently the head teacher of, and the head teacher at the time I was sat around the table. It's actually really weird to think that's now my table, but
Yeah.
the table in my office. But I was an assistant head at that table, and I remember the head teacher said, "Is there anybody around the table who'd like to go and work in a primary school to go and help lead it because it's in a bit of difficulty? It's down the road. Does anyone want to, give a hand?" And I still remember lots of the SLT sort of looking down and going, like, "Oh, I don't think so."
No
Um,
eye
and
contact.
and I was like, "Maybe I'll do it." Like, sort of like completely naively, sort of, "I'll give it a go if I can help." So, and off I went, and that I had a crazy year of helping lead a primary school, and it was because of that experience that I then ended up being given sort of like it was actually, this one was a temporary an interim headship of a primary school, because I was at the point in the school the only person with any primary experience. And it was
Mm.
because of saying yes to that experience that I'd had some experience. So I do think saying yes to things, and actually this really relates to the to the research I'm doing, actually, and also to the one of the design principles around the leadership development work that I do with people. Um, there's something that the Center for Creative Leadership call heat experiences, and it's all around taking on an experience, a challenge that effectively you have to grow to survive. Like, in order
Mm.
to really, really like to survive this experience, this challenge, you have to grow in your capacity. And me putting my hand up and going to work in a primary school in, effectively, special measures, and not really, I was secondary trained, not really having, huge amounts of leadership experience. Learning things the hard way, and sort of getting things right, getting things wrong, and working collaboratively with others. It was a real heat experience. I learned so much. It was that moment where I thought to myself, well, maybe I should be a head teacher, but I
Mm.
feel like I need some development to be able to do this. A bit like going back all those years as an unqualified teacher and thinking, maybe I need to actually get some training on how to actually plan a French lesson. Like, this was the same point. At that point, I thought, maybe I need some development. And I did actually go and do the Future Leaders program after that. I signed up and I left the school. I left and I said, I'm going to go and like really learn how to do this properly. And I did. And it was, years later that I ended up going back and then leading the school that I'd been, that I'd been at,
Yeah.
the member of the senior team of. So it's
That's
funny how things work out.
Yeah, it's so interesting because part of what I'm thinking about in my research is the role of sort of managers and leaders to bring out the best in people, and I think that one of the things that I have a about with many teachers, and I don't know, I'd be interested to know your view on this, is I think there's people that can become a victim of their own competence, in a sense, where they don't get developed because they're kind of ticking along and
Yeah.
they're reliable. And, if the line manager is busy, then perhaps, we'll only have half an hour meeting instead of an hour. And if you've got any problems, send me an email. And, I understand that schools can be dynamic places, but I mean, what would you sort of say if you were going to come in as an executive head and see that kind of thing going on? What was your kind of what are you going to do then, perhaps in that situation where people are competent but not being brought along? Is that something you've observed?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, bringing the best out of people is absolutely crucial, and both either organizationally, as you say, we can start to almost think of certain people as, yeah, they're a safe pair of hands, etc. We might lean on them for certain jobs and certain responsibilities. And you're right, we might miss opportunities to develop or grow them. And equally, individuals themselves can get into that sort of space as well. So they can sometimes, if they've been doing the job for a while, you start to almost sometimes get a mindset of, sort of, I know what I'm doing, I don't really need training or development, or I don't need to, I know some people in, sort of insets say, I don't, I don't really want this. I don't need any training. Thanks. Like, I'm happy with my job. I know how to do it. And I'm, leave me alone, and I think, obviously, just like you, both of those, whether it's done organizationally or individually, I think they're both things that I don't understand. I personally don't understand, because so far in my life, and I hope this will continue, all the way to the end. I feel like if you're not growing, then you're sort of, you're atrophying. There's something, I think I've got this real drive for learning and real drive for development. And I actually really cognitively don't understand when people don't have this. I think I always find like it's a missing piece from like, oh, really? You don't have that mindset. But I think the way that you help people to do it is to, first of all, tap into what they really care about. I mean, this is the thing that I think matters so much in terms of development, is so many people have got so many strengths, and most of the time they don't even acknowledge those strengths. One of the things about our brains, as you know, is that they're wired to see the negative, to be fearful of the things that that might happen. So we spend a lot of time being worrying or even anxious around things that could perhaps go wrong, or whatever, or just worry about the negative things. So we say, oh, I haven't got through my to-do list, or I haven't done, there's so much still to do. And actually, without doing that sense-making piece that I said before, stepping back and actually saying, what have I achieved? And actually spend some time thinking around, well, where are my strengths, and where are, what am I good at? What have I managed to accomplish? If you're able to do that, I think you need an actual process to do it, because we will automatically not do it. Our brains work as path of least resistance and go to the negative. We actually need a process to make sure that we're doing the positive stuff. And then how do we develop them? I think you give them stretch experiences. You give them opportunities to apply their skills, their knowledge, their talent, all of the things, all of those experiences that they've got, and strengths, potentially either in a new context, in a new way, or one of the best ways, I think, of, my school's it was a teaching school. We lead initial teacher training. We lead MPQs. I facilitate MPQs. I think getting people to teach others about what they do is a really great way to get them to develop, because you have to, as an expert, you have to really think carefully about breaking down, like, how do I do this? If you were teaching somebody to learn to drive, and you have to sort of deconstruct how you do it when you've done it so automatically for such a long time, I think that's a really good way of developing people. But I also think what I said earlier, I mean, almost every meeting that I have with anyone, whether it's one-to-one line management, whether it's appraisal meetings, or getting people to sort of plan strategically, I always go back to that thing about, like, what's the imagined better future that we're trying to create in whatever job we're talking about. So if I'm meeting with the head of maths, where are we headed? What do you want? What's this future that you can imagine? And really getting people to think through that, and to really describe it. I love Brené Brown as a leader, and lots of people will know her. And if you haven't read her book, read Dare to Lead. It's a very good book on leadership, and simple to read, but really, really powerful. But she talks about painting done. So she says, paint done for me. What does done look like? And paint it in vivid color. What will it look like? What will it sound like? What would it feel like if we achieve the thing that you want to achieve? And getting people to imagine that better future. And once you can imagine it, almost you've got you've got the goal, you've got the objective. I talk lots about, like, with a mountain metaphor, mainly because I work for an organization called Pioneer. But we talk about, like, what's the top of that mountain? What is it that what are you trying to achieve? Like, what are you climbing for? Where are you going to? And thinking about, sort of that view at the top, what's it going to look like? And helping people really to see that. And I do think a lot of people sometimes need support in doing that. It doesn't always come naturally to people. Often people who've done the job for a while, those people that you were describing, they want to operationalize their work. They want to get on with it and do the things that they've done, and that's safe. But in order to grow, you need to imagine something even better. And just to quote somebody who is a dear friend, and somebody who I was at their retirement do actually yesterday evening. She's a head teacher. She's been a head teacher for decades, and is retiring this year from headship. And her mantra is, better never stops. And what was really interesting was her chair of governors was talking to a whole crowd of people who were there to celebrate her, and she just said better, and everyone just went never stops. And we know that about her leadership. That's
Yeah.
her mantra. And getting people to see that better never stops, and getting people to see that there's always we can always imagine a better future. In fact, we need to, because the other thing about leadership is that we as leaders are responsible for creating hope and optimism. The world can be it can be bleak, it can be complicated, it can be complex, and it can be really hard. There are hard challenges in what we're doing. There are difficult funding decisions. We know there's a cost of living crisis. We know there's staffing issues, and the teacher recruitment crisis. There's so many things that we're dealing with, from children's mental health to staff mental health, with all these things. Leaders are responsible also for creating that better future and being able to help people see that there's a better future on that horizon, and getting them to be able to see it. And actually, that's the job: getting people inspired enough to see the better future that they can perhaps bring about. And it is a skill, and it requires a bit of coaching, I suppose. So coaching people to think through that, but also challenging them to not just settle for the status quo, not just settle for this is the way we've always done things. This is what we do is fine. Don't hassle me. But actually saying, well, what would it look like if it was even better than today? If today's a 6 or a 7, well, what would an 8 or a 9 look like? God, what would 10 look like? What would it look like? And then once you can see it, almost there's something in your brain, like once it flips, once you can see it, you almost can't stop yourself from working towards it. It's like, okay, I know where I'm going now.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, it's because I think some of these things that can be quite scary as well, can't it? And I'll just give you a little illustration of what I mean. I was speaking at a conference at the weekend, and I was third, and so I was in the talk before mine, and I was feeling so nervous, and I'm like, I can't get out. I haven't had a drink of water, I haven't had my breakfast, and then I remembered something I heard about kind of reimagining your adrenaline. And so I just sort of said to myself, right, come on, this isn't a feeling of fear. This is a feeling of energy that I'm now. And I was like, really having a bit of a word with myself. How do you encourage people to kind of turn the fear into energy to drive change forward?
The first thing that came to my mind as soon as you talked about that, and by the way, I've been there, I understand it completely. I was feeling it before coming on tonight, but I was also feeling it, I talk at conferences, I talk at different things, and I know exactly that feeling of like, oh my God, why are people here to listen to me? And, and what if I dry up? Or, although you can probably tell as a bit of an extrovert, I probably talk all evening. But the first thing that came to mind as soon as you said that about how do you help people to sort of embrace the fear, embrace the challenge of say heat experiences. I think the first thing is really to say you're not doing this alone. It's about collaboration. It's about doing it as a team. I want everybody to have that sort of psychological safety that we work as a group of people. Nobody is in my metaphor of climbing the mountain. You're not climbing on your own. We're climbing as a group. We're all there for you. We've got your back. We know that you're going to stumble. It's not going to be straight. It's not going to be plain sailing. It's not. The climb is going to get difficult. You're going to fail at certain points. You're going to move backwards as well as forwards. But where you're not going to be doing it on your own. And I think sometimes teaching and leadership, of course, can be quite lonely. Teachers are in classrooms as adults, often on their own. I mean, and leaders in particular. I was just talking to the group of head teachers today about that. One of them was reflecting on the year and saying, sometimes, this net we have of head teachers that when we get together every month and, have things that we need to discuss and decide, but also there's a collegiality, there's a network that really matters to us, because we have, you need to feel like you're in it together, and you're not just doing it on your own. And so I think the more that we can bring people together, the more that we can to sort of almost, cohere groups or teams around a particular common cause and get people to work collaboratively. that's when the most joyful work that I do is not on my own. The most joyful work I do is when I'm, like today I was strategically planning with my CEO and I was loving it. We were working together. I had ideas, she had ideas. Some of them were good, some of them were awful, but we were able to sort of bounce them, off
Yeah,
each other.
yeah.
And I do my best when I'm with other people. And I feel safest when I'm with other people. And so I want to create those conditions for the leaders in my school and schools, trying to challenge people to take on, something that might be out of their comfort zone, that might be a bit of a stretch, but at the same time saying, do you know what, if you fail, it's all right. And also, making sure that failure is absolutely, if you're taking on a challenge, you're not going to get everything right, and being really upfront and telling people that,
Yeah, yeah.
but also saying to them, yeah, we'll do it together. I'm gonna support you I'm gonna be here every step of the way, but you're gonna do it, and I'm gonna help you to do it. So having somebody's back in terms of being a coach or being a mentor or just being a cheerleader, like helping them to keep going when things get tough, and really motivating them to keep climbing. Yeah.
No, that's really good. I mean, I think there's, as I say, there's an awful lot in the sort of zeitgeist, I suppose, at the moment about psychological safety and sort of high challenge, low threat, and things like that. And we talk about that for our young people, don't we? I think it can be easy to neglect it perhaps in our teachers, but I think it's vitally important. I wonder if you could say a bit more about what draws you then to the very large complexity of systems then, because you've talked a lot about the work that you do with individuals. Let's really zoom out and get up on the balcony and look at the people on the dance floor. What draws you to that complexity?
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit like I was talking about earlier, around sort of constantly sort of either outgrowing the job that you were doing, or just taking on, being, once you've mastered something, being able to continue to grow. So I think the complexity of our school system is really fascinating. Like, we've got all different types of schools. I listed like the ones I'd worked in earlier, from different phases, with maybe some with like, selection or non-selection, some with religious, a religious element, some with not none of that, some with disadvantage, like being really clear and part of that demographic, whereas others are much more privileged. We've got a real complex system. And actually, in the research, my my supervisor for my doctoral study, I referenced VUCA, which I'm sure lots of your listeners will have heard of. VUCA is an acronym, VUCA, which is a military acronym. I think it comes from the military, where imagine if you were just sort of dropped in, sort of let's think of some something like Basra from like years ago, Iraq or somewhere, something within living memory. You're dropped into that situation, and the context in which you find yourself is volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and complex. It's a VUCA complex. It's a VUCA world, and you have to be able to work within that complexity. But there are loads of different acronyms which have emerged in the research, which relate to almost exactly the same thing. There's a few that I learned recently. One's called tuna, which I've never heard of. Turbulent, uncertain, novel, and ambiguous. I think Barney is another one. Brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. Anyway, in the research, there are all of these
alphabet soup there.
Absolutely. And what's happening is, all over the world, not just in education, but in different sectors, the world is being described in these terms of where cause and effect is not linear, where you can't just neatly say, oh, well, I did this intervention and it had this outcome. Or, where I quite neatly decided to improve this area of school life. I performed these actions and then this happened. Like, we can't talk like that, and because we know that in actual fact that's not what reality is. More than that is that we've got completely colliding perspectives, and that's another design feature actually of development, is colliding perspectives around people seeing the world completely, like, from different vantage points, different viewpoints, different perspectives, and they aren't always in harmony. We've got different people seeing the world through their own lenses, through their own stories and experiences, and really finding sort of certain decisions, certain things difficult. So I suppose what draws me to all of that is the fact that it is complex, and there's a there's a framework that I have in my trust around leadership, and we try to, one of the things in it says we need to try and find joy in complexity, because what ends up happening just in leadership in general is the more leadership you take on, all those jobs that I've done, from middle leadership to senior leadership to being a head teacher to now an executive head teacher, all of the jobs, effectively you end up just taking on more complex problems, or the problems that other people can't solve or haven't got an easy solution to. And you sort of have to you keep stretching me to constantly find a way forward in really difficult and challenging circumstances, and often novel situations. I think in schools these days, that's what keeps the job interesting. We are always encountering things that we've never seen before, the good and the bad, and it is also incredibly interesting. And I actually don't know how other people go to work and go and sit at the same desk in front of the same computer with perhaps the same, open plan floor with colleagues and do the same job every day. Yeah, I don't know, making profit for other people. I actually don't understand how you have purpose and do that every day. What I want is to go into work and take on this challenging, complex thing of, we're going to try and educate the next generation of people for a world that is, really volatile, really uncertain, really complex, and really ambiguous. And yet we're going to do it with all of the stuff that we know about, all the stuff that humans have learned over time and grown in terms of knowledge and skill. I'm going to try and pass that on to them and try and deal with some of the present challenges that they're facing as well. And with an eye to the future of like what might be happening, sort of AI and all that sort of stuff. I think that's a massively engaging, motivational sort of position for any teacher or leader, and yet it can also feel daunting. And the way that I rationalize that is to say, again, like, I'm not going to do that alone. I can't teach them everything that they need to learn. I've got loads of fantastic colleagues who can, though, and I can't solve every problem that comes. But I do have a great team of people who can see things that I can't see, or ask questions that I don't ask, and then bring their strengths to different situations. So that's why I think that collaboration, that collegiality, that not ever doing it alone is, I think, the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, and I think that we do need to sort of be ready to be bold and to bounce ideas about. I think it's one of these things drives my husband crazy, because he says, right, we've got this problem, and I go, what if we do this? What if we do that? And he's like, those are insane situations. But I think it's just something about my nature. I just have to articulate them all, and then I feel like I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, but I don't mind. Whereas I think other people like to have it clear before they articulate it.
This is a classic extrovert. I refer to extroversion, but it's a classic extroversion trait that we show the inner workings of our thinking as well as the outcome. So I'm going to tell you all of the bits of the thinking and tell you where I get to. Whereas I think introverts classically tend to want to hide the process of the thinking and then say, here's the shiny product at the end. I've done the thinking. Yeah. Here's what I want you. And I completely understand that too.
No, that's really
both are valuable.
Yeah, and we do need all kinds of contributions and all kinds of perspectives, don't we? I'm going to open it up if you don't mind. I don't know if there's anybody who's listening who'd like to call in, perhaps, and ask a question or to give their perspective. I know we've got a couple of people in the studio. If you would like to dial in and ask a question about any of the things we've been discussing, please do. Feel free, or pop a message in the chat if you want to do that. And this is the bit where I have to give my thinking time to see if anybody will do it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Be
no,
brave.
yeah, go on, feel the fear. Yeah. So while we're waiting to see if anybody does want to call in, I just wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about your sort of views on education in the UK at the moment. I think we're at a bit of a hopefully a turning point for the better. But what's your sort of finger in the wind kind of prediction?
Ooh, that's a big question. And obviously, education, where's it going? What's going to happen? Well, I mean, the past is a pretty good predictor for the future, in terms of lots of things. And I do think you're right, we are at a turning point for lots of different reasons. And I don't know what you're thinking about that turning point might be, but I mean, there are lots of things. We're coming out of the sort of in a post-COVID world where it feels like there's a new normal that didn't exist pre-2020, and we are dealing with schools in a completely different way. But also that's lots of that is negative, but I think there are real strengths, and we need to look at the strengths and find the positives too. I think obviously we've got a technological sort of revolution that is happening around us, which is going to change things to a degree, but the extent to which it changes things, I probably don't feel qualified enough or expert enough to be able to say, but feel that there's there's an optimism there as well around sort of interesting avenues for teaching and learning, and for trying to to do what I was saying earlier, try and get the sort of the contents of what we've learned as human beings into the minds of the next generation. I think AI and tech and various things will help us with that. But I also was at the Festival of Education on Friday last week, at Wellington College, and I had the real privilege of listening to Daisy Christodoulou, who is actually a former colleague of mine, from the same Multi-Academy Trust, from many years ago. And she was talking about AI, and she was talking about AI and assessment in particular, and really sort of getting us to think really hard about sort of how it's going to work. And one of the things that AI does really well, of course, is if we think about things like ChatGPT, etc., it's really efficient, it's really fast. But in learning and in development, we don't always just want efficiency. And I thought that was a really insightful point, because she made a few different parallels, but like we have technology like cars that can go pretty fast, but it doesn't stop people from going for runs. We still go out for a run or go out for a walk, even though we have the technology that allows us to be faster. And it's not about just being efficient. It's actually about human flourishing, is what she said. And
Yeah.
that really resonated with me, because yes, we're at a turning point technologically, but we also want humans to flourish. And so I think well, in my school and in my trust, we talk a lot about thriving, and the idea that, again, thriving, I think, is linked to that idea of struggle and challenge, and at the same time, coming out stronger. And that idea about how do we help children to thrive in their lives today, because I'm really something that is a bit of a bugbear of mine is that we're constantly telling young people, oh, well, when you're an adult, or when you've got your GCSEs, or once you've got your A levels, or once you're at university, or once you've finished your degree, once you've got a job, actually they can thrive and do things today, like right now, as human beings.
Yeah.
And so my thinking is, how do we help them to thrive and live really great lives? And what does a really great life comprise of? And that's the challenge of like deciding. And that's where leadership comes in. We have to be able to imagine that better future. We have to imagine, what does a really great life have in it? And how do we then, again, break that down into its component parts and try and teach those things? And of course, like learning all the stuff that we have to learn, like that we teach kids, from algebra to, I don't know, the points on a compass, to the inner workings of the human body, to whatever we're teaching them. Those things are really important to pass on to the next generation. But so are things that we possibly haven't always privileged in schools, like how to have good mental health, how to practice gratitude, how to serve others, how to lead. These are skills. These are things that I personally think are incredibly important for living a good life. And some of them are more important than algebra. Some of them are genuinely
Yeah.
gonna serve you better. And actually, if they haven't learned algebra, but they have learned how to be a really great friend, then actually that might be more important. And that might be a controversial view. But I'd be happy having taught students how to be a really great person,
Yeah.
even if they haven't quite mastered, the subjunctive in my subject.
It's so interesting because as you're speaking, I'm just, and this is the kind of the philosophy and ethics geek in me. I'm just thinking, this is Aristotle. This is kind of eudaimonia. This is human flourishing and virtue, and striving to do better tomorrow, and develop into the kind of person that you would admire. And I think that's something perhaps that it would be good socially and morally and academically for schools to really reflect upon. I do think that we've lost a little by being too narrow. Because I totally agree with the breadth of the human character being such an important thing.
Well, so there's a real parallel in leadership development, actually, and in my research, which is really fascinating, because fundamentally, we all know in education, the discourse in education, certainly in England and in certain places around the world, has become around that sort of core knowledge, that essential knowledge, which we talk about in terms of, if you look at the Ofsted framework, it talks about essential knowledge. If you, we know it has its roots in sort of Hirsch and Hirschian ideas about giving children the knowledge that they need to be able to. And he did think that it was about them thriving in a particular society, and so they needed that cultural capital to be able to thrive. But I think they also need other things. Like they do need the essential knowledge, but leaders also. So what we see in say, for example, the National Professional Qualifications, NPQs, we see they also have been completely immersed in that essential knowledge discourse.
Yes.
So the DFE, when they published the new NPQs, they in their sort of preamble, they say this is the essential knowledge leaders need to be successful in schools. And that when you read that knowledge, it's a list of knowledge, literally almost like a knowledge organizer. It says leaders need to learn that and learn how to. I'm getting into this is my but sort of, so that codification of knowledge is absolutely, I think, of course you need to know those things. You need to learn that and you need to learn how to, absolutely. But if you don't feel like a leader, then therefore you're never going to do that. You're never going to engage with that content because you don't feel like it. If you don't have the schema that helps you to take on challenge, or you don't have the belief that if you try and fail, that's okay, then you might not actually want to do that either that qualification or indeed take on the challenge that actually that qualification is supposed to lead you to be able to take on in real schools and in practice. So I do think there's other parts of the job that we need, other parts of the development that we need to be doing. And for me, that's all around exactly that, around core. It's about values. It's about beliefs. It's about really much deeper cognitive schema around sort of who we are as people, identity, as well as the actual technical knowledge of how you lead a school. So all of my leadership. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say it's so brilliant, and I'm so sorry, Mark, because we are really running out of time now. But I could talk to you all evening, and I've got to say, perhaps before we get taken off the air, maybe you'll come back again, and we can talk a bit more about this kind of philosophical issue, because I think it's such an important one. So would you be up for that, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll make sure I have a few coffees that day and keep myself awake for you, Kathryn. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come back.
I am so sorry to cut you off, but we are about a minute and a half from the end. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on. This is all going to be released as a podcast, and it's going to be available. So please do share it. And if you've been listening live, share it. I know that Paul has left a message there to say that he's sort of joined the chat, and it sounds like a really lively discussion. So thank you, Paul. I know that you call in quite often, so thank you for your message this evening. I'm going to just play our final adverts before I sign us off. So once again, thank you so much, Mark, for your time this evening, and we'll be back in touch to get back into this fascinating discussion. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
So that brings us to the end of today's Late Late Show. I've been Kathryn Taylor, and many thanks again to our special guest, Mark Pritchard, who's opened up a fascinating discussion, which I hope to carry on with at some point in the future, because it's really worthwhile having, I think. Remember, there are Teachers Talk radio shows all week. Join me again fortnightly at the same time. Bye-bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.